Petunia? You're going to get one? Okay, because you'll need them later. So, did you see this sheepish little guy peeking up over the podium this morning? Can you see him way back there? It's a squishy little lamb. And right across the back of him it says, discipleship. I'm all in. Discipleship, I'm all in. There's only one way that I know for us to be an all-in disciple. To be an all-in Christian disciple, we have to follow Christ. We have to allow Jesus to lead us and to teach us how to love. Take, for example, Tabitha. Her story is, I think, a good narrative to hear on Mother's Day, because Tabitha kind of is the epitome of motherhood. She was nurturing and caring and kind. Not that fathers can't also be that, but on this particular day, we are recognizing the nurturing, caring, and kind way of mothers, which, by the way, are the very same attributes that we find in God. In fact, Tabitha's compassion was born out of her unity with God, her relationship with God, and also out of her fellowship with Christ. So I think it's fair to say that her maternal nature was an expression of her all-in discipleship. Tabitha took up this beautiful work of helping the poor, and especially sewing for the widows in her community. She very easily offered herself to other people, and in doing that, she formed close bonds with them. And because of these close bonds, when Tabitha passed away, her friends naturally mourned the great loss of her company and of her love. There were other disciples of Jesus living there in the same town where Tabitha lived, and they too were stricken by her death, so they sent word to Simon Peter that he should come from a neighboring town and join them. I've always kind of wondered if they wanted Peter there because they thought he might somehow revive Tabitha, but maybe not. Maybe they hadn't thought about that at all. Maybe they just wanted him to come to sort of oversee her burial because she was such a wonderful woman, and to have Peter there would be to pay great tribute to her life, I think. Or perhaps they just needed Peter to come as a pastor to comfort and to support them in that time of great distress. Or maybe they wanted him to come and answer those questions. Tabitha was obviously a good person, a righteous person, so why didn't God heal her when she was ill? Why was her life cut short? You know, these are the kinds of things that we ask of pastors and of spiritual leaders, and maybe Tabitha's friends were asking these difficult questions. And the other disciples hoped that if Peter were there, he could answer them and somehow help to alleviate the grief and the suffering that follows death. Not sure what they had in mind when they sent for Simon Peter. But send for him they did, and so he went to them. He went to Tabitha's home, and when he arrived there, he was led upstairs to the place where her dead body had been presented. And as he stood before that body, her friends told Peter how she had loved them and how she had sewn for them, how she had served them. They brought the clothes that Tabitha made and shared them with Peter. And they wept, of course, because she was gone from them. And when we read about their grief, the text also reiterates what the story has always told us about Tabitha, that she was a disciple of Jesus, and it's demonstrated very clearly in the way that people reacted to her. She was a student of the Lord who learned very well, quite frankly. She faithfully lived her life serving the poor and caring for those widows. She was always doing good, the narrative says. In other words, Tabitha was all in. She was all in. She heard the voice of Christ speaking into her life, calling her to follow his lead, which she wholeheartedly did. But she continued to hear him speaking to her, apparently, even in her death. It was, of course, Peter who announced the words, but that power that rose out from him wasn't really his own. The power expressed through Peter was just like the compassion expressed through Tabitha. It was born out of his unity with God and his fellowship with Christ. So when Peter opened his mouth with that command, Tabitha, get up, I don't think it was him that she heard. I think it was instead the authority of the risen Lord. And so that little lamb was revived by her shepherd. I wonder how many times the voice and the authority of the risen Lord has called us back to life, revived us, his sheep. Our response to Jesus identifies him as the Christ in our lives. That's what the Gospel of John says anyway. At least that's the way I hear it. Remember what Nell just read for us from John chapter 10. When the opposition came to Jesus asking him whether or not he was the Christ, he said to them, "The miracles I do speak for who I am. But if you can't hear that, then maybe you aren't my sheep. Because you see, my sheep listen and hear and recognize my voice. And so then they follow me." You see, when we listen and respond to the voice and the teachings of Jesus like Tabitha did, then that's our proof that this good shepherd is indeed our shepherd. We bear witness that we're all in when we hear what Jesus is saying and then follow him on those paths that lead to the poor and the hungry, the hurting, the forgotten, in whatever form we may find them. The truth is, the Christ of God revealed in Jesus is also revealed in us when we hear and when we recognize and when we imitate this one who calls us to the self-surrender of love. It's no secret that society is very unimpressed by self-surrendering compassion. And we've all been guilty of putting our own wants and our own desires above anyone else's. But even as I acknowledge my own iniquity in that, I am saddened by humanity's governing mindset. And I wonder, what if everyone one was led by a desire to, give themselves away? What if we ever offered to one another that same nurturing, maternal love that is expressed in the essence of God? What if we always lived in the benevolent grace and forgiveness of Christ? What if? What if? So, have you ever heard this poem before? It's entitled The New Colossus. It was written by a woman named Emma Lazarus in the year 1883. I love poetry, and I just want to share this with you today. Give a listen. Not the brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride from land to land. Here at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is imprisoned lightning, and her name, Mother of Exiles. And her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome. Her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbor of twin cities frame. Keep, ancient lands, your storied pomp, cries she with silent lips. Give me your tyrant, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. The wretched refuge of your teeming shore, send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my light beside the golden door. Those beautiful words are found inside the base of the Statue of Liberty. And they declare who we claim to be as a nation. And yet I am very fearful that we're not really living up to that great declaration of welcome and of grace and of community. There was once a holy rabbi of deep compassion, and he spoke similar words of his own, and his students and his followers are only all in when they uphold his beautiful credo. He said, "Come to me, all who are weak and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." If we take these words of Jesus seriously, then they will carry us back to the purpose for which we have been called. If the church faithfully follows Jesus, she is this guiding light of hope that calls humanity to a greater good and offers to everyone a place of respite and renewal. When we forget our task or fail to be all that we are intended to be, when we fail to be all in, then I think we probably need a sheep revival. We need to be reminded just who and whose we are. The Christian community at its best is an expression of God's kingdom, a place in the world where heaven and earth meet and stand counterculturally to a society that promises one thing and then dictates something altogether different. And we can't forget who we are. We can't forget that church. And we can't afford to be less than all in if we truly believe in the transformation that God's grace will bring to every single corner of creation. we need to always listen then. We need to listen with fresh ears for that shepherd who urges his sheep to follow. We need to hear again and again the voice that calls us upward, the one who beckons us from a selfless death to the selfless life of motherly compassion and nurture and grace. And so we pray. We pray, most holy God, revive us. Revive us, your sheep. Return us to your shepherd, whose heart is always open and whose arms long to embrace the whole wide world in his fold. Help us to witness to his greatness, even as we submit to his humble ways and his life-giving love. Most holy God, may this forever be our prayer. Amen and amen. In response to the word this morning, I want to ask you to do something a little different. You've all been given a petunia. And you're going to need to listen kind of carefully for just a moment. These petunias are not for you to keep. They are gifts for you to give one to another. They are reminders that in each of us is this potential to birth life. But they are also a reminder that we've been called to a life of nurture. So as you present this petunia to the person next to you, let's say maybe to your left or across the aisle if there's no one to your left, then offer it with these words. You are called to a life of nurture in the mothering essence of God. Can you do that? Will you share now your gift of life? And now, will you stand? Did everybody give their petunia away? Danny, you're looking lost with your petunia. Get it? Okay. So now will you stand and let us together join in a modern affirmation number 885 in your hymnal.